But when you do it, like anything in life, and I think about Bruce's music, when you do something, just do it. I don't overanalyze. I've never overanalyzed. I guess Bruce has thought a lot more maybe than I do about life. I've been very fortunate. Good things have happened. I run a charity. I do a lot of charity work, and I've always found the better, a bit like Gary Player, the more I practice, the luckier I get. The kinder one is, the kinder people are back to you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Lusting Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. We are up early on a Saturday, but late where my guest is, Simon Ryde. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jesse.
So we just talked for a little bit. You're having wonderful fall weather today. Where are you calling from?
Seville, Spain. I'm just traveling with my wife for 2 months in Europe. Normally, we're based in Oxford, England.
Very nice. I don't know if I've had a guest call me from Spain before, so this is a box checked off for me. Thank you. Well, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm 60 years old, been married to the same woman, 35 years, Alison, 4 children. 3 of the 4 have all seen Bruce. My oldest son, I think Bruce, I wouldn't say changed his life, but had a big impact. And I've been to 10 concerts with him from the States to Europe. I worked in finance, accountancy, and just like Bruce's show in Broadway, he says it's ironic that here he is writing about escape, life, and life's experiences from someone who never worked in a factory, etc. And I can guess similar sympathies. I mean, middle-class background, although from quite a rough neighbourhood of London. Became a CPA, chartered accountant in English, and I've been working finance property company for my whole married life, on my own behalf and with my wife. So a lot of freedom, which allowed me to travel around the States a lot to see Bruce and Europe, as I've said. And his music always had a special place, sort of. I could relate to it, despite, as I said, never having really struggled in life from a young age.
Very interesting. And please tell your lovely bride to join us anytime.
Okay.
So, hey there. You want to tell us about you too? You want to give us your elevator pitch, Alison?
I'll let Simon talk about Bruce's place in our life, but it was one of our very first dates. That he took me to a Bruce concert in Wembley Stadium in London. Was it Born to Run or Born in the USA?
Born in the USA.
Born in the USA. And but Bruce has been with us all the way.
So what I'm guessing is he's like letting you know right from the beginning, Bruce will be a member of this marriage. We need you to know one way or another if you're going to be okay with this.
Yeah, I think so.
There are fans who are more addicted, and my only regret, not in life, main regret about Bruce is I haven't seen him more often. I've been 24 times, and I have to say it really, we've traveled a lot and had wonderful experiences, but it is certainly one of the highlights of my life, being in the pit at every Bruce Springsteen concert. It's something quite special.
Yeah. Simon, I told the story multiple times. I had a guest on that saw him very early, like during that same tour where John Landau said, I've seen the future of rock and roll. Yeah. So he wasn't at that show, but he was at a show in that similar time period. And he tells the story. He looks over at his date at the time and says, we will be talking about this, all our lives. This guy is going to be something amazing. And as he was telling me the story, he says, what, I'm so regretful that I didn't see him earlier, that there were all these college shows I could have seen. And that shows that whether you see Bruce the first time in 2012 or 1976, you want to have seen more, right?
Yeah,
You're always, whether you've seen him 10 times or 100 times, it's always, I want more, I'm more, I'm greedy. Um,
right.
so you talked about growing up in a rough part of London. Talk to me a little bit. Growing up, what kind of music did your family listen to? What was it, a musical household?
Definitely not a musical household. And there's an English comic opera duo called Gilbert and Sullivan, not Gilbert O'Sullivan, from the late 19th century. And beyond a little bit of my father playing that, I'd sadly say there was no real music in the house, none.
Okay.
My father, he was a doctor, he worked hard on the national health system, and there wasn't much money. I mean, holidays was a trailer van in England, didn't go abroad, didn't eat out at all. But a very loving family, no problems at all. And I went to a private school, which was unusual in England, because the local state school was so bad that the headmaster actually said to my father, if you want your son to read and write, don't send him here. And that was when I was 3 years old in 1964. So they scrimped and saved. I went to a local, it's called a prep school, a private school.
Sure.
But no real music.
Okay, because the only reason I know about Gilbert and Sullivan is because of Aaron Sorkin references. Like, there's a scene in West Wing where they talk about that, and then also on Studio 60. So yeah, that's a genre that I have woefully unaware of. So when you became a teenager, what kind of music did you listen to?
Well, I went to a very unusual boarding school.
Okay.
Got a scholarship there, and they were very sophisticated in their musical tastes. I mean, I first heard Bruce 1975, 76. I was 14, 15. But at the same time, we were playing Jackson Browne, Bob Dylan. And this is an English boarding school. I always liked Leonard Cohen, Van Morrison. But a lot, Van Morrison is also been important for Alison and I. Love his music.
Yeah.
Lousy in concert, but live music, and I think the message and the energy and passion of life was always Bruce.
Okay.
And I first heard him, 76. I can always remember at 17, a guy putting me into the music school and said, you must hear this. And he played the whole Darkness on the Edge of Town album in 78 when it came out.
Yeah.
I can remember that vividly, but I'd already been playing Born to Run and Wildly Innocent. So yeah, from quite an early age, I guess, for an English.
Yeah. So Simon, can you articulate what about him and his music spoke to you?
I've done a lot of sport in my life, and I've always been, I'd say, quite an energetic person. And there was something that I found, the immediacy, the urgency, the need to escape, to travel, to discover in Bruce's music that I could relate to. I mean, even at the age of the day, I mean, one story from, if you obviously know the Agora album, when it's introduced by the radio commentator, and he talks about Cleveland, Cincinnati, Chicago. At 14, I was already going on walking holidays on my own. I hitched around America when I was 19, just before I saw the first Bruce concert. I first saw him the night John Lennon was shot in the Spectrum, Philadelphia. But the music always, for whatever reason, it called me. It told me, get out there, travel. I think I would have done it anyway, but I've hitched all over the South America, North America, Europe. And I guess that started right similar time to hearing Bruce.
Talk to me a little bit about this hitchhiking and traveling. That's something I've never done. I'm a very conservative, grew up in a very, lower middle class household. My dad was in the military till he retired. Then he worked for the Sears as a washer and dryer repair guy. My mom normally did not work outside the home. We were just music was a big part of our life, but I never had that adventure of getting out on the road and going. I was always. So talk to me a little bit about what drove you, and if you have, I'm sure you have at least a couple of stories about your misadventures on the road.
There's something very liberating about hitchhiking, and it didn't come from my parents. My mum has told me stories that I obviously don't recall. When I was 3, I let myself out of the house and walked to a local railway station, sat on the platform waiting for my auntie to turn up, because I overheard my mum saying my auntie was coming to visit. Right. And it's only because the platform controller was my dad's patient that he recognized me and phoned my dad up and said, "Your son's on the platform." That was at 3, and my mum tells me that. I have always traveled. From 6, I used to go up to London on my own, and I take my sister up. And a very silly, funny side story was, it was a very hot day, and I don't remember. My sister does. A very hot day. Somehow I got some sanitary towels, soaked them, and wrapped them around our forehead to keep cool. So, and this is when I was 8. My sister was 6. I've always, I don't know, gone to museums. I hitched coast to coast across America before I saw Springsteen. I encourage my older son, who, talking about your father, he is now a current officer in the British Army.
Yeah.
He hitched to Ireland to see Springsteen, and he came back a different person.
So
he came back confident.
Yeah, I know. I can imagine that. How old were you when you went to the U.S. for the first time to kind of, I'm thinking of Paul Simon, Out for America. 19. I
hitched. I can still remember the route roughly. But I hitched to LA, and then on the way back, I'll name him. I mean, if he ever hears this, I think he's still a Boss fan. Yeah. Craig Levin gave me a lift from Yellowstone National Park back to New Jersey. We became friends for about 10 years, and he is the guy who both played the Agora live in his car while we were driving back, and took me that December. I went over again. I met a girl, and I flew to New Jersey where he lived. He drove me down to the Spectrum. We went to the concert on a snowy December night, and I hitched after the concert to St. Louis, Missouri, 30 hours nonstop in the snow.
Wow.
Just I loved it.
That is a little bit crazy and a little bit brilliant.
But when you do it, like anything in life, and I think about Bruce's music, when you do something, to do it. I don't overanalyze. I've never overanalyzed. I guess Bruce has thought a lot more maybe than I do about life. I've been very fortunate. Good things have happened. And I run a charity. I do a lot of charity work, and I've always found the better, a bit like Gary Player, the more I practice, the luckier I get.
Yeah.
The kinder one is the kinder people are back to you.
What have you thought about, and maybe I'm overanalyzing this, but your career is a very precise, job. You are, there are, like, I made a joke once that back when you used to balance a checkbook, right? Before you didn't have online, when I reconciled my checkbook, if I got within $10, I'm like, good, that's good. I'm, here's my new balance, go forward. And, I had a good friend who, she still works in accounts receivable, and she's like, and my mom, she'll spend 4 hours finding the 8 cents difference of, so why do you think there's such a different balance? Is it because you've got your work hat on and I need to be detail oriented, and then when you take your work off, you're like, let's be spontaneous and crazy?
I'd say, Jesse, in my work, I play big picture stuff.
Okay.
So, I run a property company. It allows us to be on the road now for 2 months.
Yeah.
I've always been very loyal to friends and vice versa. So there are people in England who I totally rely on, and I'm talking about working with them for 30 years. So there's total trust. So it allows me to escape. I have never overworked. I was with a big corporate at the beginning. It's so old, Price Waterhouse in the 80s. I lived in Australia. We went to Australia in the 80s with my wife and I when we met. Nearly migrated there. I just did big picture stuff. So an example in America, simple one, 30 years ago, interest rates are 14%.
Yeah.
My music can only go down. In America, you've had a 30-year bond rally. It's come to an end. That's a big picture thing. Once I made that mind up, direction of travel was easy. So it meant I could always travel. I had 4 kids. I was always around them. Nearly every January I've gone back to Australia on my own for 2.5 weeks, staying with friends, swimming on Bondi Beach. But big picture, I've been very privileged to be at home, to listen to Bruce describing in Thunder Road in Agora. He goes, I flew out to Salt Lake City, Utah with Steve and a couple of friends, and then we hired a big old Ford and drove to Reno. And I'm thinking, shit, I hitched from Reno to Salt Lake City, got stuck in Elko for 3 years. So I remind myself, of these stories. I think, wow, I've done that. How lucky I am, because I live very much in the present. I forget it. I take it for granted what I've done.
All right. So Simon, you talked about, you've shared that you've seen Bruce, and I always like to preface this. The amount of times you've seen Bruce perform is not a good barometer of how big of a fan you are. Depending on where you live, depending on your economic situation, depending on your age, there could be people that have seen him hundreds of times. There have been people who've seen him once or never that are still massive fans. So you've said roughly a couple of dozen times. And that first one was during that first trip in the US. Talk about some of the other shows. Give me some highlights, give me some stories. Take your time.
So I actually wrote to Bruce saying how each major landmark of my life, I think there was a concert involved. So
tell me a little bit more about that. That's interesting.
I saw him before he was very big in England in '82. He played in Manchester. We went 3 nights in the Manchester. It was a cinema. I got photos still on an album of Clarence playing from, I was maybe 6 meters from him, if that. Just where it was a stage and you're sitting off the stage. It wasn't a stadium like that concerts. Then, as Alison said, I met my wife in '85. Love. I knew I was going to marry her the first time we went out, and it was all agreed within the week. And we went to a Bruce concert at Wembley Stadium. Then big connecting with my eldest son, Ben, who said he's an officer in the British Army. We've driven around, we flew to Washington and we went to concerts on the Wrecking Ball tour in Pittsburgh, Raleigh. I've been with Alison again to the MetLife Stadium when it was called the Giant Stage, and I went twice in the 2012 tour. One of my favorite songs, Living on the Edge of the World, when he opened the concert to that, it was like being punched in the stomach, the sheer energy when he starts that concert off. This is for Jersey, they know this song. So that Ireland, my son hitched to Ireland. I was sick, so I couldn't go with him, and I flew over and joined him, and as I said, he came back a different person. He applied for Sandhurst, which is the British West Point, and is now a captain working with NATO in Eastern Europe.
Oh, I know you must be proud.
Very. He's done Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle. It's called Public Duty, changing of the guard, leading that. And Bruce really did bring us together, because he struggled. He was a bit depressed for a bit. And we went to Paris to see him twice. And he loved the music. And as I said, I told him, go and hitch to Ireland to see him. We went to 4 concerts in about 8 days in Ireland. And I joined him at the end, and he was a different person just from that alone. So yeah, my wife, Ben, my daughter, my kids all over the place. She lives in Singapore right now. We went to Dublin to see him in about 2015. I knew that was going to be one of the last things I could do with her in person, one-on-one. She's now married, lovely guy, and they live in Singapore. So he kept coming up at these key dates.
You mentioned 3 out of the 4 children have seen Bruce.
Yeah.
What is the other one too young, or just has no interest?
No, neither. He's here in Spain with us.
Yeah.
And he said, look, Dad, I hope I could see him with you. I'm the only one who, that's why I came to mind. I thought he had seen him. They all know the music. I played it in the car, all the live concerts over and over and over again. He said, I just haven't seen it with you. They all like the soft rock music, they like Jackson Browne, Dylan. It just didn't happen with him. I'm sure he'd enjoy it. I hope Bruce does another tour. I'll take him.
Yeah. What were your thoughts about Letter to You and Western Stars?
I have to say, the later Bruce stuff, I see where it's going, but I still, I think, drift towards the passion. My passion is the earliest music, to be honest. I can still play, like, now, I played it today, Backstreets, and when I hear the line, Terry, you swore we'd live forever, I still relate to that. His later things, and some of his songs, they're good. And, they're more introspective, and his analysis of life. And I like that, but I guess I still have that older spark in me where how do I put it? I'm not saying looking for the magic, because life has been magical, but I think it's what I think, I actually relate to more than the more recent albums, I'd say, in all honesty.
Good. Did you care for the Western Stars film?
Not too much.
Okay, that's fine.
I mean, I would say up to about 2014. I mean, one thing that's grown, I mean, obviously, a real diehard Bruce fan, but classical music, as I've got older, I'm 60, has become a more and more important part. I mean, we're very involved with an orchestra. We actually travel with a classical orchestra and we go to concerts. I'd say Wrecking Ball, I've become the dinosaur. I've frozen in time probably about 2015.
Okay.
I'd say 2014.
Okay.
And my progression after that is probably I have to say, is limited. I hark back, and as I say, I'm classical music. Beethoven has become a real passion of mine.
Okay.
Piano sonatas, but that's an aside. But yeah, it was. I'd say Bruce got me to this point, and maybe less of a diehard fan than I was, but the link with the kids, and if he came on tour, I'd certainly be there. 8 a.m. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think there's no right answer, right? Like for me, because of the context of when Letter to You came out, the political strife here in America, actually everywhere in the world, but the pandemic and everything, all of a sudden there's this new Springsteen album, just plays a special part in my heart. Go ahead.
I'm a real economic pessimist, and while Springsteen he talks about the hope and the American dream, I'm sorry to say I think it's come and gone. I mean, America is a nation that has $27 trillion of debt. In 400 years from when the Pilgrim Brothers first landed, they have developed and exploited a whole continent. 400 years, which in the course of human history is nothing. And my kids know I'm a bit miserable like that, but I'm very concerned for the whole future of mankind, because I don't think we're able to make what I see as the real sacrifices necessary if we're going to address the issues Bruce and society talks about.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
It's not about electric cars. That's just a feeble cop-out. It's about consumption. I really believe we terribly overconsume as a society. In my world, if I'm not saying CO2 gases are the cause of global warming, but if they are, going electric is a red herring. It's about the first world consumption needs to fall in half and our living standards have to collapse. That's my current bee in the bonnet, I'd say.
Okay, very nice. What can you list? What would be, if you were telling people your favorite places to see Bruce? Is it easy for you to kind of say, oh, I love seeing him in Spain, or I love seeing him in Jersey or something? Like, is there some favorite places for you?
I mean, Jersey is obviously great. I have to say the Irish are very, very keen on him. So going to Ireland for a concert, and I only had one bad concert weather-wise, and that was 2012 at the MetLife Stadium. That's the only time it got delayed. I thought they were going to call it off, and it started at 10:30. But Ireland is great. I don't think it's not bad. You get your diehard, Brits are very keen fans. I think maybe easier to queue up in a warmer climate. Paris was a good concert at Bercy. That was a very good concert. Probably favourite, I'd say, Cork, Ireland and Jersey.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. When when he tours in 2022, which we all hope he's going to do, you know, Blogness on the Edge of Town, Peter Chianca just did a poll. So just I'm kind of asking the same questions. What kind of show do you think it's going to be? Do you think it's going to be a career retrospective, more of a greatest hits, a lot of letter to you? What is your feeling you think he's going to do?
Given the nature of his, sort of work on Broadway and what he's saying, I'm assuming this will be the final tour. It would be could be greatest hits or retrospective. You could say that there's a big overlap between the two, retrospective and greatest hits. I assumed it was going. I've always assumed there'd only be one more tour, more limited. My wife's already said if he does a tour in America, just go over there and follow him around. And I would.
Yeah. Okay. Very nice. Are there songs you're still looking for? Are there songs, Simon, that you haven't heard him perform live, but you still wish you could?
I mean, look, there's a few songs that everyone loves, and I have played thousands of times, and I would play thousands of times more. He could spend 4 hours playing Jungle Land over and over and over again, and I would never tire of it. It's just a fantastic mini opera. It's the most incredible song. And I think a man at 24, 25 writing a 10-minute operetta that takes, you can just imagine the opening scenes. I can feel Magic Rat and his car and the girl sitting on the hood of the Dodge. It's all there. And I never tire of that. I never tire of Backstreet. Sadly, these are the older stuff, but they still, they mean a lot to me, and I picture it. And in my more positive moments, I mean, I've encouraged my kids to hitch, and we've done, even now, I have been all over the world. I've crossed the Andes. I run a charity in India. I've been in Tibet and China, off radar, and I just find the energy and the passion and the drive of his music still relates to me. So it has to be, I think of Thunder Road as, I mean, Born to Run was the album, I think, where he engaged with his audience. That was when it really started. The first two albums, I love The Wild, The Innocent, but I don't think there was that engagement with his fans. So, Thunder Road is the opening of a journey, and it's gone from then on. Backstreets, Jungle Land, Darkness on the Edge of Town, Racing in the Street. They're sort of my favorites, and never tire of them.
Is there any place you haven't gone that you want to? Because it sounds like you've traveled pretty extensive.
Secret, I shouldn't say too much. This has been a bad year for me. I had stomach cancer. I had a major operation 6 months ago. I'm fine. I'm swimming 2K. I think I've dodged a bullet. But when I was in hospital thinking, is this it? And I thought, I had no regrets, and I couldn't think of anywhere I must go somewhere. I mean, really, I've traveled very extensively. I worked out about 53 countries, but I don't just mean popping in. I've been to Australia for 2 years. I've probably spent a year in the States. I've hitched in South America when I was 21. I've hitched through Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, so a lot. Very little. If my day was up tomorrow, my wife says, "Oh, shut up! You're too morbid." If it was over tomorrow, I've been bloody lucky. I was white Western male at the right time. What else can I say?
So, Simon, I'm glad to hear you're doing better. Was there a tumor in your stomach and they have to take it out?
Yeah, exactly.
Did you have to have gastric bypass?
What's the gastric? Yeah, they've cut out a chunk, and basically, so I thankfully haven't had to have a bag outside. So no.
Okay.
They did keyhole surgery, and I'll know next April. Where they do further monitoring. I've had blood tests, and they just see whether it's gone.
Yeah, the reason I ask is in March I was very, very tired all the time and very anemic. And I ended up going into the doctor and they said, you have a tumor in your stomach. We're worried that it is cancer and we need to take it out. And because of the size of the tumor where it was located, they ended up having to take out part of my stomach and intestine and
Yeah.
actually do a gastric bypass. So I went from, 350 pounds, I'm down to about 280. And my stomach is now the size of an Easter egg. So I've had to change all my eating habits. I've had to change everything.
That's interesting, because the key result of this, I eat probably 60% of what I used to eat. I mean, in my younger day, when I was 37, I did the Ironman triathlon.
Yes.
So I'm used to doing long distance endurance stuff. I used to crew quite seriously.
Yeah.
But now, I swam. I'm swimming 2K quite happily, and I'm running. So
Did you do Kona? Did you do the Ironman in Kona?
No, believe it or not, when I did it in England. It was the only one that existed at the time.
Oh, okay.
Not a very glamorous setting, but that was an example of just getting on with it. I heard of it. I never knew what an Ironman was. In April '98, I heard of it, and so 98, and we were, again, my year's wrong. So 97, I knew my wife just got pregnant, and then they were going to be twins. I thought, I'm going to do an Ironman. So I just trained for 5 months, no assistance, and did it.
Yeah. My wife has done a couple of half Ironmans.
Wow.
And she tried to do a full one, had a really good swim, a good bike, and then she was doing it in Florida, and it was unseasonably warm, and she just got into the run in the middle. She just, in fact, she ended up, having to go in the ambulance, supposed to, to go to the doctor, getting fluids, getting her through. So I know how hard that is. That's an accomplishment.
The only way not to finish, I'd say, out in an ambulance.
Yeah, that's what I in fact, I have a picture of her, her two wrists next to each other, and one has her medical bracelet, the other has her race, band. And we got her a little plastic ambulance that we put on her desk as kind of her finishing trophy. So good.
It's all credit going that far. That's very good.
It is. Yeah, that's what we do. And I told her, we talked a lot about it's the journey. I believe Better Days, his song is all about, focusing on the here and now, enjoying life as it gives you, and not dwelling on, well, later I'll be happy. Let's be happy now with what you're doing. So I think she enjoyed the training and the journey. And yes, while she was disappointed, she also, accepts the fact that, it wasn't to be, and that's okay. So, well, good.
But you said it, life is a journey. I mean, if you don't enjoy the journey, I mean, what's the goal? The end of it is we all end up in the same box together.
Absolutely. Other stories that you want to share? You mentioned a little bit before we started recording, when you put on your, kind of political theory cap, there's a lot of things about Bruce's music that you think speak to that. You want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, we live in Oxford. I know lots of social historians, and it's not for me to, I guess, analyze how much history I know, but I've certainly read a lot of economic and social history. So in relation to post-war, the States, I mean, England's a mess, but the States, where I imagine most of your audience are, I, as a kid, could watch Happy Days. You remember the Fonz. And this was a golden era. Post-war, America in the war was never bombed on the mainland, and it grew, and it basically took over the realms from Europe as the world superpower. And Happy Days personified the blue-collar worker, and Springsteen grows up in this era, and he talks about his father not getting regular work, and the anger of his father, the depression, and etc. And then, I'm 60, so 10 years young, 11 years younger than Bruce. But in the late 70s, I first hitched around to the States. I was in Cleveland, Cincinnati, St. Louis, Kansas City. I went through Texas, LA, go right then upstate California, then hitching east again. And then you could already see, places like Cleveland. I thought I could already see, I guess I was observant economically, in the beginning of decline in industry. People were already talking about the growing market of Japan. In the 80s was Japan's decade. I qualified as a CPA, went to America, and the last 25 years, and you can hear it, and I think it sums that up perfectly on the Agora introduction, is this is a radio concert being broadcast over American radio networks throughout the industrial heart of America. And Bruce talks about it in so many of his songs, and that heart has gone. And the inequality of America, the movement of people to the south, whether Florida, Texas, the decline of the tax base, the growth of debt as a nation, I think rings enormous alarm bells, which, for all the talk of the left wanting to handle, other than Bernie Sanders, the mainstream Democrats, even Obama, lovely guy, just weren't willing to deal with it, because the American people are not willing, neither the British or Europeans, to deal with this, I think, brutal reality that's hitting us smack on. I mean, in some.
Yeah, I do think that in a lot of ways, as a society and as individuals, we worry about the problem, but we don't want to sacrifice necessarily, the things you need to do, because I don't want my life to be inconvenient.
Correct.
Right? Like, yeah. So I totally get that.
I can tell you the other side of that. I mean,
Please.
I have done well financially.
Yeah.
We support, and I've been supporting for four years now, I think, a whole slum in India. I pay for everything: food, education. I'm in regular touch with them, and we have someone who does the number crunching. There are hundreds of millions of Indians who will live on, we're on Zoom together, who have a house with their husband or wife and two kids, half the size of your living area. They'll have one light bulb. And the women, often the men drink, they're violent. And we run education programs and job training for the women, so they can earn $8 a day. And they suddenly they can have control of their life, that they get the money, they can buy food and feed their kids. And there are people, some escape that, most don't. And I've always just felt very privileged. And so we've done work there. I've done, I said, in rural China, we've been funding operations for scoliosis, spinal deformities, for the poorest of Tibetan children. And every day, I mean, it's probably, my wife said I get to him as well, I just feel how lucky and privileged we've been, being white and Western, and having lived in this era of basically easy employment, economic stability, and growth.
Yeah, well said, my friend. Well said. Any other thoughts you want to share before we get to the Mary question?
Not really. I mean, I've heard Bruce on Broadway and his blog with Obama, and it's very pertinent about the relationship side. They talk about their fathers and relationships. But the one thing that would worry me still is, they're both now extremely rich people, and America has this enormous divide. And my concern for America as a country is how you bridge the divide when even Democrats talk about, we want a fiscal stimulus or raise more money, but no one really takes it seriously. Okay, we put up tax by 4p in the pound. People forget what taxes were like in the 70s. They were way, way higher. And I'd be paying a lot more tax, but if you're serious about these issues of inequality, you don't address them by tinker around with the status quo. And that's the only thing that hearing Bruce and Obama, it wasn't about finance really, but it's comfortable to talk about these demons that you have and these nightmares and these fears and your concerns when you are very sheltered from the front line of what is happening out there. And it is happening.
Yeah.
That is probably my biggest passion. So, I'm one area right wing, but I'm quite left wing in those areas. I know in America, it doesn't have a big audience really. It's growing. Right. And I think if things get very bad, it will grow more. People will vote when they have to. for the things that today they avoid.
Yeah, I think so. I do think so. And I do think that it's a lot of the laws going into effect, like here in Texas and other states that seem to be on the surface, they say it's because they're worried about voter fraud, but when you dig in deeper, it's to make it harder for certain people to vote. And it's very disturbing for me as someone who leans to be more on the left, and understanding that, we go back to some of Bruce's early thoughts, no one wins unless everyone wins.
Yeah.
And yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff, Simon. I really appreciate it. All right. If you are a friend of Simon's and you're listening to this, thank you. I end every show with the Mary question, and what the Mary question is, Jay Armstrong, who is an honors English teacher in the Philadelphia area, he recently retired, has a book coming out. He's going to be on the show in a few weeks. He would spend 2 days with his honors English class discussing the poem Thunder Road, talk about the imagery, the lyrics, everything about the song. And then at the end of it, he would ask the question, does Mary get in the car? Simon, that is your question. Does Mary get in the car?
I always just assumed she did. She had to.
Okay.
Otherwise, the rest of the story wouldn't happen. We wouldn't be on the back streets, and we wouldn't even get to Jungle Land without Mary getting into the car. The journey starts with the car.
Very nice. Very good. If someone wants to reach you, how can they? Are you on any social media or?
No, I said my wife put me on the Zoom. I've always avoided social media other than email. I use email.
Okay. Well, then I won't want to give out your personal email. So very nice.
I don't mind. I'm assuming if it's just about Bruce, you can give it out. I don't mind. But,
all right.
Yeah,
all right. I will include that then. Simon, this is great. When do you go back home?
2 more weeks. We got another son teaching English in northern Spain. We're driving through San Sebastian to see him on the way back to England.
Very nice. Good. Well, continued safe travels. Fascinating conversation. I really appreciate your passion and your sharing about your thoughts and your journey, and just, continued blessings on you and your family. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on the show, and all the best to you.
Absolutely. Listeners, please go get vaccinated. Let's continue to wear our masks. Let's continue to be good to each other, because that's the only way we're going to get through this. Thank you, listeners. Thank you, Simon, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye. Set Listing Bruce has a Patreon page where you can offer to donate anything from $1 a month up to whatever amount you want. Thanks to the wonderful people who support the podcast through Patreon, I'm able to cover the cost of the Zoom recordings and the hosting of the podcast, putting it out, things like that. So thank you to Holly Mack, Steve Rogers, Dale Hosack, Terry Smith, Anna Lynn, Chris Bloom, Mary Thomas, Alex Samolta, Andrew Goddard, Betsy Hodges, Levi Petrie, Stephen Malio. Each of you are my Springsteen siblings. You are my angels, and I appreciate you so much. Thank you for all your support and love.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.